Hi Dixons, I'm Shirley Watson, Executive Director and former Principal of Dixon City.
And I'm Jenny Thompson, Executive Principal here at Dixon's Academies Trust, and very happy to be spending my afternoon with Shirley today. Today's little episode hopes to share our Trust's approach to self-determination, its current iterations and its origins. Shirley, in many ways, you have had and continue to have the career I aspire to. You know so much about Dixon's and have a real appreciation of where so much of the thinking began. I'm hoping that you could share a little of that today.
Thank you, Jenny. Today I'm going to talk to you about self-determination, a theory that has influenced us at Dixon's and an approach that you can trace right back to the early days of the CTC and is very much part of the founder's mentality, as Sir Nick referred to in his first video with Luke. And while so much has changed in 30 years, much for the better, self-determination as an approach, and now adopted more formally as a theory, continues to be part of our culture. In Luke's earlier session on mission mapping, he refers to 3 important characteristics found in the culture of high-performing schools, as clearly defined social norms, aspiration, and motivation. And today, I'm going to be talking specifically about one of those characteristics, motivation. And although today is talking about staff, in the future we'll talk more about how we develop this in our students. First though, a little trip down memory lane for some, and perhaps an insight into Dixon's past that you might not have known about. So appropriately, we are sitting in the amphitheatre at Dixon City, where it all started 30 years ago. This innovative space to me is representative of the founder's mentality of 1990. And in the text, Zuck and Allen describe how one of the key differences that companies that achieve sustainable growth share from other companies is a common set of motivating attitudes that can be traced right back to the founder who got it right in the first place. To quote directly from the book, in the early days, those companies considered themselves insurgents, waging war on the industry and its standards on behalf of the undeserved customer, or creating an entirely new industry altogether. And for those of you, and there are still a handful of staff who do remember the 1990s, I think you'll entirely recognise Dixon's CTC in that description. And what at the time was a highly innovative approach to developing and motivating staff, I pride myself in having been brought up in a profoundly professional environment where staff self-determination and intrinsic motivation were incredibly high.
Could you identify some of those early ideas that have proven so formative to Dixon's as a trust?
So joining Dixon's back in the 1990s, the first thing that you encountered was an on-site weekend training day where you were inducted into the school's norms, values and unique culture. The central message was that at Dixon's the sky was the limit and that with a can-do attitude there was no end to what you could achieve. At the end of your induction day, you were ceremoniously handed your Dixon CTC emblazoned file of facts, probably one of the most symbolic artefacts of that time. And for those of you versed in semiology, I will leave you to determine the message. On joining as a new employee, you spent 2 whole terms in after-school induction sessions, and during that time, you were presented with your white CPD folder and associated buff forms. This was your personal development folder, and one in which you recorded your personal achievements as well as external and internal CPD. During induction, you were introduced to performance management, and at the CTC, Dixon's store group processes were followed. The mantra was, your appraisal, your responsibility. And the aim was for you to really own your goals and determine the outcomes you wanted to achieve in order to take your next step on your career path. Early on, Sir John said publicly that one of the biggest lessons that he learned was that growing your own talent was the way to ensure a cohesive culture and sustained success. John understood the importance of the diversity of thought, and as a result, rebel ideas from young rebels like me, hard to believe, were encouraged as long as you were culturally aligned to the mission of delivering the best possible results for the students.
And that is just a further example of how structure liberates. It is incredible to me that so much of what you describe here is still tangible today. We are a team of rebels. In fact, in our Powerful Knowledge episode, that is really what we are talking about. We are facilitating that for the children.
Absolutely.
I know today you're mostly talking about motivation, but was aspiration very much part of those early days too?
It really was. My overwhelming memory of Sir John is his annual vision statement when he would reveal what our next step were going to be in the highly aspirational targets we were going to meet. The vision was delivered with fluency and conviction and left us in no doubt that the vision would be realised, and indeed it was. Being part of Dixons was something to be proud of, as it is now, and it felt like a really special place to be. Although we didn't know it at the time, this was because we were intrinsically motivated and we were self-determined. So, back to 2020, and although we no longer have the Dixons Filofax or the Buff forms, self-determination resulting in intrinsic motivation remains a really important part of our culture.
And that takes us to the theory. Could you give us the expert's overview?
I can give you a layperson's, Jenny. So, self-determination theory is a psychological theory of personality and motivation, which evolved from social psychology in the 1970s. Central to the theory is the view that humans have natural growth tendencies and want to learn and develop. Behaviourist theorists such as Deci and Ryan developed the theory further and posed that all humans have three universal and innate needs that must be fulfilled for humans to achieve a sense of well-being and motivation: competency, autonomy, and psychological relatedness. The theory posits that there are two main types of motivation: intrinsic and extrinsic. If the three basic human needs are met, competency, autonomy, and relatedness, then individuals are intrinsically motivated. Deci and Ryan recognise that extrinsic factors do motivate individuals. However, the effect can be limited, and some research even suggests that extrinsic reward can, in the long term, have the opposite effect. Extrinsic factors mean that the individual is motivated by the reward, whereas intrinsic factors lead to reward being received from the activity itself. Deci and Ryan explain the difference in drive between extrinsic factors and intrinsic factors by the use of a continuum. On the extreme left, there is demotivation or amotivation. And as we move to the extreme right on the continuum, there is extreme intrinsic motivation where the individual's basic needs are fully met. They achieve a sense of well-being and they are driven to be successful.
And Shirley, how do you feel this would be visible today at Dixons?
Well, more recently, Dixons leaders have been influenced by Daniel Pink's book, Drive, which draws on self-determination theory and many behaviourist studies into intrinsic motivation, particularly in the workforce. Mastery, autonomy and purpose, perhaps a more compelling iteration of self-determination theory, particularly as competency nowadays can have quite negative connotations. Mastery. First and foremost, Dixons academies, no matter where they are on their improvement journey, are calm and orderly environments where teachers can teach and students can learn. We have clear and simple routines and very high expectations. As a teaching institute, we have full and diverse offer of CPD courses, and because we're a research school, as a profession, we greatly benefit from the most up-to-date research. We're not interested in faddy initiatives, and we like to keep things simple. Regular, kind and helpful feedback is an embedded part of our culture, and we strongly believe that with support and motivation, all can be driven to succeed. Autonomy. Autonomy is a really important word at Dixons. You'll see in Luke's session on aligned autonomy that this is our operating model and also one of our 3 strategic anchors. We dedicate time to departments to encourage staff to work together collaboratively so that they're able to determine the powerful knowledge that they're going to teach. Middle leaders are to us the powerhouse, and we always listen to them with regards to curriculum planning. We believe in pushing power down, and our middle leaders really do drive the agenda at our cross-cutting teams, which we'll talk about more in future episodes. Executive leaders are purely facilitators. We are really clear about what is aligned and what is not. Therefore, there is room for diversity of thinking and healthy debate, particularly around what constitutes powerful knowledge. Traditional staff inset days are given over to teachers to plan and replan teaching so that lessons are highly tailored and include everyone. We begin with the most vulnerable. They're not an afterthought or an additional column on a planning document. We have real clarity around great habits for learning in all of our schools. However, how a principal and their team executes the learning in their classrooms, in their school, is very much down to them. Our appraisal system is entirely based on self-determination theory with an emphasis on personal growth, as much as quantitative external measures. Accountability is holistic and entirely fair, and just like in the 1990s, the emphasis on the appraisee rather than the appraiser owning the process. The most important part of the process is honest self-reflection. And purpose. Dixons is known for clarity of purpose. Our mission is lived and breathed by everyone. We understand how important relationships and connectivity are, and staff are members of lots of teams both within and across the trust. Collaboration serves two main functions. It builds those highly professional and supportive relationships, and it leads to improvement. Diversity and belonging are really important to us. For example, we have women in education programmes running, and we also have an anti-racist cross-cutting team.
Which is really where our wonderful Shireen will pick us up in our episode on drivers. Thank you so much, Shirley. As ever, it is an inspiration to talk to you.
Thank you, Jenny.